Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight, let's talk about one of the most misunderstood and maligned concepts in all of economics, profit. Now, say the word profit in polite company and watch the reactions. Some people will nod approvingly, but many others, perhaps most others, at least among the educated classes, will frown. They will think of greed. They will think of exploitation. They will think of fat cats getting rich at the expense of ordinary working people. This reaction is understandable. It is also profoundly mistaken, and this misunderstanding has consequences, serious consequences for human welfare and human freedom. So let's set the record straight. Profits are not a sign of greed or exploitation. Profits are a signal. They are the signal that makes civilization possible without profits and the losses that are their necessary counterpart. Modern economic life as we know it simply could not exist. Let's begin at the beginning. What is a profit? At its simplest, a profit is the difference between what it costs to produce something and what someone is willing to pay for it. If you spend $10 making a widget and sell it for $15, you have made a profit of $5. Now, what does that profit tell us? It tells us something extraordinarily important. It tells us that you have taken resources worth $10 and transformed them into something worth $15. You have created value. You have made society richer by $5. This is not a trick of accounting. This is not an illusion. This is real wealth creation. The resources that went into your widget, the labor, the materials, the energy had alternative uses. They could have been used to produce other things. By using them to produce your widget, you took them away from those alternative uses. The profit tells us that you used those resources better than they would have been used otherwise. You created more value than you consumed. This is the fundamental insight that critics of profit almost always miss. They see profit as something taken from others. But profit is not taken. Profit is created. It represents the creation of new value that did not exist before. Consider the alternative. What if you spent $10 making your widget and could only sell it for $8? Then you would have a loss of $2. And what would that loss tell us? It would tell us that you destroyed value. You took resources worth $10 and turned them into something worth only $8. You made society poorer. Profits and losses are two sides of the same coin. They are the market's way of telling producers whether they are creating value or destroying it, whether they are using resources well or wasting them, whether they are serving consumers or failing them. This is what we mean when we say that profits are a signal. They are information. They are the market's way of communicating to millions of producers what consumers actually want and how urgently they want it. Think about the complexity of a modern economy. There are millions of products, billions of consumers, countless possible ways to combine labor and capital and raw materials. How do we decide what to produce? How do we decide how to produce it? How do we coordinate the activities of millions of people who will never meet, who speak different languages, who have no way of communicating directly with each other? Central planners tried to solve this problem through commands and quotas and 5-year plans. They failed. They failed catastrophically. The Soviet Union had some of the most brilliant mathematicians and economists in the world working on their planning problems. They had enormous computing power, at least by the standards of their time, and they could not make it work. They could not figure out how to produce the right goods in the right quantities and get them to the right places. Why did they fail? They failed because they did not have the information they needed. They did not know what consumers actually wanted. They did not know the true costs of production in different locations and with different methods. They did not know which resources were scarce and which were abundant. They were trying to solve a problem with millions of variables, and they simply did not have the data. The market solves this problem through prices, and profits are the most important prices of all. When profits are high in a particular industry, that is a signal that consumers urgently want more of what that industry produces. Resources flow toward that industry, new firms enter, production expands, the urgent need gets met. When profits are low or negative, that is a signal that consumers do not value that industry's output very highly, or at least not as highly as they value other things. Resources flow away from that industry. Firms exit, production contracts. Resources are freed up for other uses that consumers value more. This process happens automatically. Nobody has to direct it. Nobody has to plan it. Nobody has to understand the whole system. Each individual producer just has to look at their own profits and losses and respond accordingly. The system as a whole coordinates itself. This is what the great economist Friedrich Hayek called the use of knowledge in society. The knowledge about what to produce and how to produce it is not concentrated in any single mind or any planning bureau. It is dispersed among millions of individuals, each of whom knows their own particular circumstances, their own skills, their own local conditions, their own customers' needs. Profits and losses are the mechanism that allows this dispersed knowledge to be used effectively. Now, Let's address some common objections, because they come up again and again in discussions of profit. The first objection is that profits come at the expense of workers. The idea is that every dollar of profit is a dollar that could have gone to wages. The capitalist gain is the worker's loss. This view fundamentally misunderstands where profits come from. Profits do not come from exploiting workers. Profits come from serving consumers. A firm that treats its workers badly will find it difficult to attract and retain good employees. A firm that pays below market wages will lose its best people to competitors. In a competitive market, wages are determined by the productivity of labor, not by the greed of employers. Consider the historical record. Where have workers fared best? In the capitalist countries with the highest profits, or in the socialist countries that try to eliminate profits? The answer is obvious. Workers in the United States, Western Europe, and Japan have achieved standards of living that workers in the Soviet Union, Mao's China, and Cuba could only dream of. The countries with the most profit have also been the countries with the highest wages. This is not a coincidence. Profits and wages are not enemies, they are partners. Profits provide the incentive for investment, increases the productivity of labor. Higher productivity means higher wages. The way to raise wages is not to attack profits, but to encourage the investment that profits make possible. The second objection is that profits encourage greed and selfishness, that the pursuit of profit brings out the worst in human nature. But consider what the pursuit of profit actually requires. To earn a profit, you must produce something that other people want to buy. You must serve your customers better than your competitors do. You must use resources efficiently. You must innovate and improve. You must pay attention to what other people need. Is this greed, perhaps? But if so, it is greed channeled toward socially beneficial ends. The business person who wants to get rich has only one way to do it in a free market, by providing goods and services that other people value. The profit motive aligns self-interest with the public interest. Compare this to the pursuit of power in the political arena. The politician who wants to advance has to make promises, form coalitions, build organizations, defeat opponents. These activities may sometimes serve the public interest, but there is no automatic mechanism ensuring that they do. The pursuit of political power is just as much driven by self-interest as the pursuit of profit. But political self-interest is not automatically channeled towards serving others. As Adam Smith observed over 200 years ago, it is not from the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, or the baker that we expect our dinner, but from their regard to their own interest. We address ourselves not to their humanity, but to their self-love, and never talk to them of our own necessities, but of their advantages. This is the genius of the market system. It takes self-interest, a universal human trait that is not going away anytime soon, and channels it toward the service of others. It makes benevolence unnecessary, though not unwelcome. It allows strangers who will never meet to cooperate for mutual benefit. The third objection is that some profits are too high, that there is something wrong when a company makes billions of dollars while ordinary people struggle. But what does it mean for profits to be too high? High profits are a signal of unusual success in serving consumers. They are a reward for innovation, for efficiency, for taking risks that paid off. They attract competition, which eventually brings profits back down to normal levels. Consider the technology industry. Companies like Apple and Microsoft and Google have made enormous profits. Are these profits too high? Those profits reflect the fact that these companies have created products that hundreds of millions of people find tremendously valuable. The smartphone, the personal computer, the search engine, these innovations have transformed daily life for billions of human beings. The profits are commensurate with the value created. Moreover, high profits attract competition. When one company demonstrates that there is money to be made in a particular market, others rush in to get their share. This competition drives prices down and quality up. It spreads the benefits of innovation to consumers. The high profits that initially rewarded the innovator get competed away over time. The only time we see persistently high profits in a particular industry is when competition is somehow blocked, usually by government regulation. Monopoly profits that persist year after year are almost always the result of government protection, patents, licenses, tariffs, regulations that raise barriers to entry. The solution to monopoly profits is not to attack profits in general, but to remove the government-created barriers that protect monopolists from competition. The fourth objection is perhaps the most fundamental. It is the objection that there is something morally suspect about earning money without working for it. That profit is unearned income, that the capitalist contributes nothing and takes everything. This objection rests on the labor theory of value, the idea that the value of a product is determined by the labor that went into producing it. This theory, which goes back to classical economists and was adopted by Karl Marx, is simply wrong. The value of a product is determined by what consumers are willing to pay for it, not by how much labor it took to produce. Consider a simple example. Suppose someone spends 100 hours making a mud pie. Does that mud pie become valuable because of the labor expended? Of course not. Nobody wants a mud pie. The labor was wasted. On the other hand, suppose someone finds a diamond lying on the ground. They expended almost no labor. But the diamond is valuable because people want it. Value comes from satisfying human wants, not from expending effort. And the capitalist does contribute to the satisfaction of human wants. The capitalist provides capital, the tools, the machines, the buildings, the inventory that make production possible. Without capital, workers would be far less productive. The capitalist also bears risk. The capitalist's money might be lost if the enterprise fails, and the capitalist performs the function of entrepreneurship, deciding what to produce, how to produce it, which opportunities to pursue. These are real contributions. They deserve real compensation. The profit that the capitalist earns is not stolen from workers. It is the return on the capital that the capitalist has provided and the risks that the capitalist has taken. Let's talk about what happens when profits are attacked, when governments decide that profits are too high and take steps to reduce them. The most direct attack on profits is price controls. The government decides that the market price is too high and decrees a maximum price that sellers can charge. This happened in the United States in the 1970s with gasoline. The government imposed price ceilings in response to the oil crisis. What happened? Shortages, long lines at gas stations, people waiting for hours to fill their tanks, violence breaking out in gas lines, a black market where gasoline sold at illegal prices. The price controls did not make gasoline more available. They made it less available. They destroyed the signal that would have told producers to produce more and consumers to use less. They replaced the orderly allocation of the market with chaos. Or consider rent control, another popular attack on profits. The government decides that landlords are making too much money and imposes limits on what they can charge for rent. What happens? Housing shortages, deteriorating buildings because landlords cannot afford to maintain them, a black market in apartments, long waiting lists, corruption, all the pathologies that we see in cities like New York and San Francisco that have had rent control for decades. The Swedish economist Assar Lindbeck, who was hardly a free market radical, once said that rent control is the most effective technique presently known to destroy a city except for bombing. And he was right. Look at the housing stock in rent-controlled cities and compare it to the housing stock in cities without rent control. The evidence is overwhelming. Attacks on profit through taxation are more subtle but equally damaging. When corporate profits are taxed heavily, there's less money available for investment. Less investment means slower growth in productivity. Slower productivity growth means slower growth in wages. The workers whom the tax was supposed to help end up worse off. Moreover, corporate taxes are not really paid by corporations. Corporations are just legal fictions. The tax is ultimately paid by some combination of shareholders, workers, and consumers. The incidence of the tax depends on the specific circumstances, but the burden always falls on human beings, not on abstract entities. And capital is mobile. If profits are taxed heavily in one country, investment will flow to other countries where the tax burden is lower. This is not a threat or a prediction. It is simply a description of how investors behave. They seek the highest return on their capital, and taxes reduce returns. High corporate taxes do not soak the rich. They drive investment away and make everyone poorer. Let's step back now and consider the big picture. What has the profit system accomplished in human history? 200 years ago, almost everyone was poor. Today, billions of people enjoy standards of living that were unimaginable to their ancestors. Life expectancy has doubled, infant mortality has plummeted, diseases that once killed millions have been eradicated or brought under control, literacy has become nearly universal in developed countries and is spreading rapidly elsewhere. None of this happened by accident. It happened because of economic growth. It happened because people found ways to produce more with less. It happened because of innovation and investment in entrepreneurship. And the engine that drove all of this was the profit motive. The profit motive told producers what to produce. It told them how to produce it efficiently. It rewarded those who succeeded and punished those who failed. It coordinated the activities of millions of strangers into a coherent system of production and exchange. Could this have been accomplished by central planning? The 20th century gave us a controlled experiment. Half of Europe tried central planning. The other half relied on markets. Half of Korea tried central planning. The other half relied on markets. China tried central planning and then switched to markets. The results are in. There is no ambiguity. Market economies dramatically outperform planned economies on every measure of human welfare. Higher incomes, better health, longer lives, more freedom, more opportunity. The profit system won. It won because it works. It works because it solves the fundamental problem of economic coordination in a way that no alternative system can match. Now, this is not to say that markets are perfect or that profits always go to those who deserve them. Markets can be manipulated. Information can be hidden. Fraud can occur. There is a legitimate role for government in enforcing contracts, preventing fraud, and maintaining competition. But the imperfections of markets must be compared to the imperfections of the alternative, government control. And government control has its own failures, which are typically worse. Government officials do not have better information than market participants. They do not have better incentives. They are subject to political pressures, special interest lobbying, and the temptation to use their power for personal benefit. The choice is not between perfect markets and imperfect markets. The choice is between imperfect markets and imperfect governments. And on that comparison, markets win decisively. Let's close with a word about the moral dimension of profit. There is a strain of thought going back centuries that regards commerce as somehow base, that the merchant is less noble than the warrior or the priest or the scholar, that making money is less admirable than serving God or country or truth. This prejudice has caused enormous harm. It has led to policies that impoverish nations and enslave peoples. It has given moral cover to tyrants who promise to transcend the grubby concerns of commerce and build a new society based on higher values. But what are these higher values that supposedly transcend profit? They are usually some version of power. The warrior conquers and takes by force. The priest commands and demands obedience. The politician taxes and regulates and controls. Is this really more noble than the merchant who produces and trades? The merchant creates wealth. The merchant serves customers.